Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, you've done a good job this morning. I must say, though, I'm disappointed that you're here and not your CEOs, because we're talking about policy and the policies of the companies, and it's fine to send general counsel, but I think if you could take a message back from this committee, if we go through this exercise again, we would appreciate seeing the top people who are actually making the decision. I want to begin by two quotes, and I generally don't read quotes, but these are so apt. The first one says this: "Nothing was more to be desired than that every practicable obstacle should be opposed to cabal, intrigue, and corruption. These most deadly adversaries of Republican government might naturally have been expected to make their approaches from more than one quarter, but chiefly from the desire of foreign powers to gain an improper ascendant in our councils." That's Alexander Hamilton in the 68th Federalist. He saw this coming. The other is a more recent quote from a fellow named Vladimir Kovkov, who's a former GRU officer, and he said, "A new type of war has emerged in which armed warfare has given up its decisive place in the achievement of the military and political objectives of war to another kind of warfare, information warfare." And that is exactly what we're talking about here today. And I think I appreciate the chair and the vice chair giving us the context of what we're doing. Their visual demonstrations, I think, were very vivid, and the warfare is the division of our society. And it's not only us, it's the entire West. We know that the Russians were involved in the French election. We know that they were involved in the German elections. We are now learning that they're involved in the separation of Spain. And my understanding is they've set up shop in Scotland, which is talking about an independence vote from Great Britain. So this is a sophisticated worldwide strategy that applied here in 2016. There's one other piece I'd like to add to what the chair and the vice chair did, and that is that it's still happening. This is a service of the German Marshall Fund called, interestingly, Hamilton 68, that follows hashtags on a daily basis. And I just picked a day in September to show these are the hashtags that are being propagated. Weren't created by Russians, but these are 600 Russian websites that are using. These are the hashtags that they did on these particular days. And the interesting thing, Syria's up there. Clearly, Russia has an interest there. But then we have the NFL, and then we have boycott the NFL. Then we have stand for our anthem. We have Make America Great Again, Russia, take a knee. In other words, they were tweeting on both sides of the NFL dispute in order to exacerbate the divisions. One witness this committee had said that their strategy is to take a crack in our society and turn it into a chasm. And that's exactly what we saw in 2016. And my point here is it hasn't stopped, and it won't stop. So we have to figure out what to do about it. And it seems to me that there are three possibilities, one of which you can make a significant contribution to. The other two, frankly, are up to us. The first is a technical defense, the kind of thing you've already been talking about today, checking identities, identifying the source of this kind of information. And I want to pursue that in a minute. The second is we as a society have to understand when we're being conned. I spent some time a year ago in Eastern Europe before our election, and the Eastern European politicians, all they wanted to talk about was Russian meddling in their elections. And I said, how do you defend yourself? You can't undo the internet. You can't turn on the TV. They said, all of our people now get it, that this is what the Russians are doing. And when they see one of these postings, they say, oh, it's just the Russians again. We have to develop that level of sophistication so that we know when we're being misled. And to me, the mentality is the same one we all apply at the checkout counter of the supermarket, and we see a tabloid that says a movie star had a two-headed baby. We say, oh, that's just a tabloid. We need to apply that same kind of sensibility to these kinds of fake news, misleading, and purposeful distortions. The third thing that we have to determine, I think, is that this country has to have some kind of cyber warfare deterrent capacity. Right now, there's no price to be paid for meddling in our democracy. And our adversaries have to understand that if they're going to undertake a campaign like this, there will be a price to be paid, there will be results, and if they do X, we are going to do Y to them. Right now, that doesn't exist, and all of what the Russians did last year has basically been a free pass. And I think that's a very difficult problem. Now, let me ask the technical question. Mr. Stretch, could you, for example, require a date line on a posting that said where it comes from, just like a news story says Moscow, September 23rd? Is there some way to identify the source of information as it comes across your news feeds?
Senator, it's a great question. We do permit users to identify the geographic location of the post. We don't require it. There are oftentimes privacy considerations that would prevent a user from...
You could require it by country, couldn't you? You're not
There are many uses of our services, Senator, where requiring people to designate their physical location could be problematic. I would make two other points. One is because of the way the internet is architected, your geographic location can be disguised. That's something we need to work on in order to make sure we're not being fooled, because I think your larger point is an excellent one. The geography of the location of the user paired with the content they're serving...
It's part of the information.
...is part of the information, and we need to do a better job tuning our systems to be more sensitive to that.
Mr. Walker, you said something similar. You said they, being the people, should know what they're getting. When we get information, we know it's in a newspaper. We see the name of the author. We see the dateline. And we're in a new information distribution world here, and we need to think about how to apply some of the principles that have helped us to assess that information. And I hope that you all will continue to develop policies just as the newspaper business did 100 years ago, that help your customers to analyze and assess the validity of the data. The problem now is we're just taking what comes as it comes. I'll end with this. I have a quote on my kitchen wall that my wife found, and it said, "The great problem with quotes on the internet is determining whether they're authentic. Abraham Lincoln." Thank you, Mr. Chairman.